Welcome to Jonygitar's Comic Blues podcast. Today I'm reviewing what's called The Amazing Spider-Man number 18. I want to be careful doing this because this is why I got into comic podcasting. I've done half a dozen reviews now, and they've been mostly good reviews. And this particular comic pissed me off so much that this is why I'm doing this. And I don't want all the comics I review to be like this, but this is written by a guy named Spencer. And Spencer is responsible for something called Secret Empire. That's this group of comics, the arc that made Captain America a traitor and had half the characters killed and changed the orientation of everything. It's like a Saturday Night Live gag, a 5-minute gag that's gone on for 3 years now, that nothing has made the fan base more angry than this guy, Nick Spencer's Secret Empire. So this issue, Spider-Man 800, this was the last issue of a guy named Dan Slott. And he had the book for several years, and this was his last issue. So this is the 18th issue by this guy Spencer. You can see the legacy number here is 819. And what I'm talking about here is that, without getting a copyright strike, it's a comic called Spider-Man that Spider-Man doesn't appear in ever. And this is maybe the 15th or 16th comic that called Spider-Man that Spider-Man doesn't appear in at all. There is no Spider-Man in. Now, you know that right now, some character called Miles Morales in a cartoon and in comics is the new Spider-Man. So Spider-Man isn't Peter Parker anymore, it's a black guy. And every month, it comes out with a black kid in a costume saying, he's Spider-Man, I'm the only Spider-Man, and here is a Spider-Man comic, and Spider-Man isn't in it. He's not in it. I'm going to stop turning is that Spider-Man? I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm about halfway through, and you'll have to take my word for it. Spider-Man doesn't appear in the comic book. Let's see. All right, I want to give you an idea because I own more Spider-Man than any comic book. This is just my childhood Bronze Age run that started, and this is accepted. This is by Jerry Conway. This is what's the really great Spider-Man, and trust me, he's in every issue. All these have Spider-Man in them. The comic is called The Amazing Spider-Man, and it's because Spider-Man is in the comic book. I've got a box of Silver Age Spider-Man too, but I just wanted to bring these out because these are ones that I bought for 20 cents and 25 cents in the store as a kid. And this again here last year is the last appearance of Spider-Man. So there's a movement that's much maligned. It's called Comicsgate. And it's part of the political derangement syndrome going on right now, where everything gets reduced to, oh, it's a bunch of haters and they don't like women or they don't like I think you can look at my reviews and the comics that I've reviewed, and that's not the case. What I don't like is Marvel deliberately destroying their top-of-the-line characters, because at the same time, there's a friggin' comic book called The Amazing Spider-Man where Spider-Man doesn't appear in it. There's a comic book called Captain America that Captain America hasn't been in for a year either. And there's a comic book called Iron Man where he hasn't been in it in a year either. So I think Marvel Comics is deliberately trying to destroy their old characters by just sabotaging their comics. How do you get rid of the old ones? You screw them over. You don't put them in their own comic books. And then what do? You've got an Iron Woman, that's a black girl. Iron Girl. And you've got Miles Muchacho, who's your Spider-Man. He's a black guy. You've got all these different things going on. Captain Marvel it's a girl. Captain Marvel's a girl. It's not Captain Marvel. And this is just, when you flick through the entire damn thing and Spider-Man isn't in his book anywhere, and just for the censors, I haven't gone past the halfway point in the book. I've been stopping everywhere. And you'll have to, here's the halfway point. You'll have to take my word for it. Spider-Man is not in Spider-Man. And this is how Marvel Comics is destroying their characters. They just screw them over so the public doesn't get a good idea of who they are. And then when you change the characters into something else, they've killed off the regular book. This book used to sell 250,000 copies. It's going to be lucky to sell 20,000 copies. There are other podcasts, Comics Matter, Comics Pro Secrets. There are different people that know a lot more about the Yellow Flash. These people know a lot more about Comic-Con numbers and sales. I'm a critic, a comic book critic, because I know fucking comic books. I've been reading them my whole life, and I own all the best ones. And that's the part I can tell you. I can tell you what's a good story and what is a shit story. And Nick fucking Spencer, this is a shit story. And either you are deliberately trying to sabotage Spider-Man, or somebody, I don't know, the executives at Marvel told you, just make a shit comic and don't put Spider-Man in it. And then when we change it over to a black guy, that's what we got, you know? And it's a shame that a guy like me has to point this out, because this is what's happening. And it'll be years when you look and you say, what happened to Spider-Man? I mean, who is this? Who is this? Is that supposed to be Mary Jane? I don't even know who this is. I don't know what this is. This isn't a Spider-Man comic book. Anyway, I got in, and is this Miles Mucho Morales? I don't know. No. Who is that? I got to think about whether even to post this. Is it worth my time and my reputation to point it out? Who's this? I don't know. I'm really irritated. I love comic books, you know, and that's why I'm doing this podcast. Some of these are just the greatest comic books. These two, Spider-Man 121 and 122, the death of Gwen Stacy and the death of the Green Goblin and the turning point. This is like considered the prime of the Bronze Age, you know. And Spider-Man 129 here, where this is the first Punisher. And this is just so important to comics. It's so important. And this Nick Spencer, who has made Captain America a Hydra agent. It's a derangement syndrome. It's part of what we have going on. I'm not going to mention all the politics in this country. I don't want any part of it. But people are deranged. Half of the country is fucking deranged. And they've been fronting conspiracy theories to the rest of us that are garbage. And no, Spider-Man isn't in the Spider-Man book. And this isn't the first one. This is the 15th issue of Spider-Man I've picked up, with Spider-Man maybe on the cover, but not in the comic, Nick Spencer. And I'm going to be asked tomorrow to spend another $5 on a comic book by Nick Spencer called Spider-Man that's not going to have Spider-Man in it. And it's about time somebody talked about it, you know? I've made my cat upset. He didn't want to get into this. It's not his problem. You okay, buddy? It's all right. We'll get Spider-Man back. This is Spider-Man, okay? Spider-Man is a big guy. He's a goofy kid. He's a tough guy. He's muscular. He's not some shrimp with his mouth hanging agape who's a fool and an idiot. He's not a black kid. He's not a pig. He is not a girl. He's not an old lady. He's not a ham. He's not a spider ham. He is Spider-Man. And he's an endangered species right now. Peter fucking Parker. So, say a little prayer for Spider-Man tonight. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Tomorrow's a new day. New comic book day. Let's see what Amazing Spider-Man 19 looks like. Okay.